Hey, Senda.
Hey, Phil.
I got like a couple of tweets with some questions, and then I got like a really pressing, somewhat ridiculous question of my own. Can we just throw them in a bag and make a show?
Yeah, absolutely. Are you suggesting that we're going to put them in a bag and then grab them out of said bag?
Yes. I think that's exactly what I'm saying, that we should have some sort of grab grabbing bag.
Don't
grab
stop.
Bag.
Don't stop. Grab bagging.
Don't stop. Grab bagging. Hold on for another
Cue
tweet.
the music. Cue the music.
And welcome to another fine episode of Panda Talking Games. I'm your host, Phil, who's got a really interesting math and cooking question that's going to take up one of our topics tonight.
And I am your other host, Senda, who does cooking things mostly by instinct.
That may or may not help us tonight.
It may or may not.
But anyway, we're not a cooking podcast. We're a
Yet.
tabletop RPG podcast. So we are actually going to talk about tabletop RPG stuff first. But since this is a grab bag episode, if you're new, these are not our normal episodes. Our normal episodes are usually centered on one topic that we discuss. But grab bags are when we kind of start getting like a couple of questions, and that none of them are really big enough to be a whole topic, but they're also good enough questions that we don't want to just let them pass by. So we
Yes.
tend to collect them up and take them on. And so we had two questions come up today when we put out a call for ideas. And then I'm just going to inject my ridiculous nonsense.
It's pretty ridiculous. I'm not going to lie.
It is. I'm going to inject my ridiculous nonsense at the end of the show.
Good.
But first, we should talk about tabletop role-playing stuff. And AD and David had a question on Twitter. What was that question?
Yeah, AD and David said, I'd love to hear more about the spark mechanic you have talked about in the past. So we can definitely talk about it more. Just to make it clear right now, like this is a thing that is still in development. It's in like we've messed with it a little bit. And of course, since there haven't been any conventions for the last year due to the global panorama, we haven't tested anything further than where we were, right?
So a touch of history on the spark mechanic. So the spark mechanic arises from our Ditch Lily game that we're designing.
Yep.
Right.
Which specifically, just to further set the scene, we know that the ditch lilies are all disaster buy,
Yes.
or disaster pan. And so part of the genre that we have invented for them is basically Scooby-Doo / 90s animated adult cartoons, not adult as in erotic, just like adult as in not aimed at children, with a lot of like disaster relationships constantly. So that's like one of the genre tropes that we're creating. So this is a game that intentionally pushes the players to be potentially falling in and out of relationships constantly.
Exactly. And so during playtesting, I ran into a case during playtesting where I had an NPC try to make a pass at one of the ditch lilies, and the player just wasn't really down with that because they just didn't like the NPC.
Yeah, which is completely fair.
Right. And then I wound up doing something in retrospect was actually not good, and is what actually led to the discussion about the need for a romance safety mechanic, which was in a later scene, I had that same character show up and try one more time.
Yeah.
And I don't remember which of the lilies it was, like which of the ditch lilies it was.
It
was Megan. It was Megan.
Was it Megan? Okay.
Megan was out for a jog the second time this guy showed up.
Oh, right. Yeah.
And so we got to talking about like, yes, it's a game about disaster pan, disaster buy relationships and getting into stuff like that. But like, what if a player isn't feeling it about a particular NPC? Like, what do you do? And it also comes about from a thing where when GMs are planning, like if a GM, and I'm going to take this outside I'm going to take it outside of the Ditch Lilies as well. But like when sometimes a GM will plan for a character to be a like romance interest, right?
Yeah.
And if it doesn't connect, like they just kind of like sometimes like in a smarmy way, kind of like will like try to push them.
It.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So all of that led us to discovering a need that we needed a romance-based consent tool.
Yeah.
That we could use in game to make sure that an NPC was good for romance, right?
Right. That flirts were on.
Yeah, exactly. The flirts were on and could proceed like even like from flirts to romance to whatever. Okay, so we wound up calling the mechanism the spark mechanic, or just spark.
The spark,
and
yeah.
Why don't you tell us like how the mechanic works?
Yeah, so basically, if you're in a scene and there's an NPC, this is very Ditch Lilies specific, but it could, expand past this. But the initial case scenario is you're in a scene and say you're the GM, you have a cool NPC, someone is playing a Ditch Lily, and you're like, this NPC is a potential love interest, right? Because pretty much any NPC is a potential love interest in the Ditch Lilies, and that's part of the reason that this has to exist, right? But so like, okay, here's an NPC. If you think that you might be reading a situation in which it would be interesting to have that disaster romance pan thing come up, then you as the GM can ask the player, this is key, the player, not the character, the player, is there a spark? And what you're really saying when you say that, I mean, firstly, you're saying is like, do you think that it would be fun to play these characters out? Like on one level, you're saying, would it be fun for this romance to happen, right? But on another level, you're also saying, are you, player, comfortable with playing a romance between your character and this NPC? A potential romance, right? So this is basically, it's table shorthand for covering multiple levels. Like, is this a story thing that you want to see? Are you as a player comfortable playing this out, etc.? Is there a spark between these two characters, right? And this is something that we very specifically take out to the player level, not the character level.
Yeah.
Because it's really important that at this point we're talking about safety and comfort of the players at the table, not necessarily prioritizing like whatever story the GM or other people at the table might want to see, romance-wise, right? Because there's so many options for romance in the Ditch Lilies. Like the other thing about it is like if one person is honestly just not comfortable playing romance at the table, they can just be like, no, there's not a spark. There's not a spark. Like they never have to say that there's a spark, and everybody else can be disasters, right? Like it's fine. But so that's the idea behind it is there a spark? If you, the player, say yes, you are saying, yes, we can proceed. You have my consent to proceed, and like we can have the flirts, and like this can go as far as it goes. And of course, this is then bound by things like lines and veils that you set up at the beginning of your game, right? But this is just the should we pursue?
Yep.
Should we pursue that storyline? If the answer is no, there's no romance. Like you just remove that part out. There's no flirts. There's no like innuendo, whatever. Like that part of the relationship does not express.
In addition to that, because I'm looking at the notes, in addition to that also signals that the GM cannot ask with that NPC again.
Yes. Again, the GM asks once per NPC. Yes. And that's also key, right? That's key that both the GM asks once, and if the player says no, that character will not pursue any type of action that could be interpreted as basically hounding them for trying to get flirts or relationship, right?
Exactly.
So that's like, those are two key things. Firstly, the GM only asks once. Secondly, if there's a no, like anything that could be perceived as romance like that, you're not playing out. It's not romance, right? The other key piece to this is that the player can change their mind at any time, meaning that if this NPC sticks around for a while and they said no originally and they change their minds later and they're like, actually, now there's kind of a spark, right? They can still tell the GM at a later point, I think there's a spark here. But they could just initiate that without the GM asking even, but they can change their mind about a no answer. They can also, of course, and this is also key, change their mind about a yes answer, right? So if you have a romance going on and there is any reason for it to turn into a no, if it was only at flirts and you're like, no, this isn't working for me, we're not going down this path anymore, cool. There's no more spark. Like, we're not going to play that out anymore. Or, you know, maybe you got to romance with this character and you're like, this isn't working. You break up with that character, there's no more spark, right? Like, and that might have emotional repercussions, but like it means that there is no more romance pursuit. I think that's the correct way to say it, like the pursuit part, right?
Exactly.
So, yeah, does that kind of cover
so it
everything?
does. I just want to highlight a few things.
Like we said, we're kind of in development on this, so it's an ongoing evolution of how we express at the table, and I just want to make that really clear. Like, this is not a completed tool, but feel free.
No. So here's a few things about it, right? So first of all, you encapsulated it perfectly. It is purposely very player-centric, right?
Yes.
So we know that in role-playing games, there is an implied power dynamic between facilitator GM and fellow player. In the current version of the Digital Lilies, there looks like there is a facilitator GM. That may or may not be true as we get further.
We'll see.
Into
recently.
it may not. It may not be needed. It may remain, but we're not worrying about that part. So because there's an implied power dynamic between player and GM, the spark mechanic rests mostly in the hands of the player. And the idea for that is to make the player as comfortable as possible so that the player never feels put upon. They don't feel pressed to have a romance with an NPC that the GM is trying to push into scenes, whatever. And so the whole idea becomes that the GM can ask, but only ask once. Mm-hmm. But the player is free to change that answer later, right? So Brad the barista makes a pass at Lily early on in the story, and the player who's playing Lily is like, "No, there's no spark." Brad's still in the, it's fine. The GM's like, cool. And Brad's still now in the rest of the thing, but after Brad helps out, fixing the van so that they could get to their gig, the player who's playing Lily is like, now that we've hung out
for a while with our, up to our elbows in grease, chatting, actually, I'm feeling different about this Brad guy.
Exactly. Yeah. So Brad remained, as a GM, as the NPC, Brad remains constant. Brad is no longer romantically involved in Lily, but the second that Lily, the player who's playing Lily, says, you know what? I think there is a spark. Now we can have romance occur in the game. So the whole idea, the whole intent of it is to be very player centric, because GM has all sorts of NPCs they can go to. They don't need to push an NPC, onto players. It really it's one of those things, right? You can't plan for when it's going to click or what NPC it's going to click with or whatever. So we want the player to have that power. Now, if you are looking to translate this into your own game, you are absolutely welcome to do so. So if you're playing a D&D game and you've got a player who's got a super flirty bard, right? Who's getting into all sorts of trouble. You can use this mechanic, right? And you can even reverse this mechanic. Now, while we made it very player-centric where the player only asks, or where the GM asks the player, in the Ditch Lilies, that works perfectly fine because the Ditch Lilies are kind of proactive characters. They're going to get into messy relationships.
It's like I said, part of the tropes that we're literally building for the game. Yeah.
Right. Now, it works perfectly fine in reverse. A player could certainly ask a GM, I'm feeling a spark with this NPC. And maybe the GM wants to say no, right? Or yes.
The GM gets to say no too.
Right. Like when we presented it very much GM to player, but this mechanic works 180 degrees. Like it works in the completely opposite direction.
Yeah.
So now, for instance, let's say you have super flirty bard, right? In your party, who is like trying to hit on, like they're being a bard, right? This is like a good mechanic for like
bad stereotype of bards, and the internet has decided anyway. We're not going to go down that rabbit hole, but as someone who has played bards in the past, who did not seduce everything,
really, I've seen you play games before. You really made a bard that didn't get into some sort of disastrous relationship?
Was a kender. No one would be in a relationship with her.
Yeah, well, that's different. All right, first of all,
along.
let's just pause for a moment. A kender bard?
Yes.
Were you doubling up on obnoxious?
It was the first character I ever played. I had no idea that was.
All right. I'm pushing this whole thing to the side. All right, forget. Push that out of your mind for a second. If you are playing a bard who happens to be flirty, and you want to have that consent before you before you become like the gross bard that hits on the, like every barmaid
everything.
Right.
Yeah.
You can use this mechanic by saying to the GM, like, I see the bartender as they pass me the drink, and I kind of give them the look. Is there a spark? Mm-hmm. Right. And the GM could be like, no, the bartender is busy as hell. They kind of look at you and like push your drink and give you a nod and send you on your way kind of thing. Right. Like it's totally fine. It works in both directions. It is a consent mechanic, right? It is what the purpose of it is, to establish consent, so that actions don't look stalkerish, smarmy, icky.
Yeah. So, and just to throw it out there, so the reason that we have this in addition to lines and veils and something like an X card is because romance is something that you usually want proactive consent for before you jump into it in a game. And so this is it's basically a means of just having a specific conversation that is understood in brief words.
Yep. It's a shorthand.
So that you have a shorthand for it, to be like, do I have your consent proactively before we go down this path? No, cool, we're not doing it. Or yes, awesome, let's go. Right?
Right. And so like in a lot of games, maybe you have romance come up in games sometimes.
Yeah, maybe.
So, like I have a lot of RPGs I play where romance isn't even a thing. No, I mean you're the opposite. I play some different games. We play some different groups, right? So,
can I just butt in here and say, so we're playing Once More Into the Void. I played Once More Into the Void, like the short version with my home crew. We ended up with a poly triad, a polyam triad, and then the Strange was the robot who kept appearing at the bottom of the bed to watch. Like, it was really awkward, but amazing.
Yeah, I mean,
carry on.
my gaming group is very different, right? Like, I'm playing DCC. Like, we don't have romance in DCC. We don't have romance in our Forbidden Lands game or anything like that.
I'm so sad.
It's just that's the game I play with that group, and it's fine, right? Like, it's not a problem. The point being is that the reason this whole this mechanic came up is that the Ditch Lilies is very much a game that pushes on the tropes of like disaster romances and things like that. They're a rock band. They're in town. It's the 90s. Like they are disaster buy and pan characters. Like they're like, I mean, one of the things that we've always said, like, one of the things we've always known about the Ditch Lilies is like they hook up with each other, constantly.
They hook up and
like,
break
through their
up
history.
constantly. Yeah.
Right. And also with people they've met in town, right? So those are all tropes of the game. So we very much needed a way to express that consent. And like you said, it's really just a shortcut. Like we don't like we could have just not had it and you could have just had this conversation. Yeah. But in order
might
to
happen
kind of,
a lot in the Ditch Lilies is the thing. It's a streamlining tool.
It's not only just a streamlining tool, it's also a thematic tool.
Yeah.
Right? Like it's one thing to bolt on safety tools onto the side of your game, but it's another thing to start building your games with your safety tools built into them.
Yeah.
Right. And so
this is part of the mechanics of the Ditch Lilies.
Exactly.
Right?
So the spark mechanic is a integral part, but it is also transferable. So feel free, David, if you find a need for it in your, if you find a need for it in a D&D game, by all means, absolutely go ahead and use it. We're gonna nail it down and codify it and all that in like when we work on the Ditch Lilies and get ready to publish it, but that's not gonna be for a little while.
Yeah, it's not gonna be for a little while. So like anybody listening, if you end up employing this or something similar at your table, we would love to hear about your experiences using it because you're really play testing for us. So thanks.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, cool first question.
Cool first question. So our second question came from Mo T, the tabletop bellhop on Twitter, and he asked, what have you changed due to the pandemic and the lockdowns that you won't be changing back once things open up?
Yeah.
Right.
So Mo wasn't super specific with this question, so we thought we would address it in two spheres, which is non-gaming related and gaming related. Right. Since again, the show's primarily a tabletop RPG podcast.
It's probably going to be about like half and half this time. I don't know.
It's fair. But we thought we'd start with some non-gaming stuff first. Like, what things did we kind of change during lockdown that we don't want to change back? Like, what was one of yours?
So I make my own bread constantly, all the time. I don't buy bread anymore at the store. I don't ever want to again. If I have to go back into the office 5 days a week, I'm not going to be able to. I'm going to have to make like a double batch on weekends, like, because it's a long rise time. But it's a weird thing. And I know a lot of people started making bread during the pandemic, but like my bread is so good that I bought some store-bought bread the other day, like a couple of them, probably like 6 months ago. And I was like, no, this bread is fine. I remember really liking it before. And I tried it like, cause I just didn't have time to make bread or whatever. And I like ate it. And then I was like, never again. I will just continue to make my own bread forever. It's very easy. It's not expensive since I have a pound of yeast. Jeez. So I buy my flour from Costco now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
In large quantities. Yeah. That's like a really specific microcosm of things that changed in my life. I make my own bread. What's something that you're going to take forward?
So I'm definitely going to take better self-care. I was pretty bad at self-care before the pandemic. And I got much better at self-care in terms of recognizing that it's not a one size fits all kind of thing.
I have
different self-care mechanisms. And if one isn't working, like I kind of hit the other ones, like shopping is a self-care, reading, playing
Minecraft,
video games.
Yeah.
What else? Like Star Trek has been a big... What's that?
TikTok.
Oh, TikTok's a huge one, right? TikTok's a huge self-care thing. All of those things. And so what I've just come to learn is that it's nice to actually spend some time doing self-care. Oh, well, bike riding was another one. This is
bike riding
self-care,
is a
right?
good one.
I love bike riding.
Yeah, I actually picked up like daily walking, which I haven't been doing because it's been gross here for forever because spring, which is weird because it's normally not like this. But like walking like daily walks is not a thing I used to do. It's now a thing that I do pretty consistently. It's very good.
Yeah. I was really bad at self-care. I mean, I think like I was like every couple months I was ready to torch everything, right? Like torch shows, torch encoded all of that stuff, right? Like I was very much teetering on the edge of burnout for a long time heading into the pandemic.
Yeah.
And then I got much better at self-care because shit got a lot harder. Like self-care became paramount because it was like getting scary and stressful, and especially during those early days, it was really necessary to find ways to cope. So I did.
Yeah.
How about you? What's another one?
This is also like all of my things are actually kind of fall under the umbrella of self-care if you want to be more broad about it, because bread is self-care, and also journaling is self-care. Like journaling both from the perspective of like I have now played a bunch of single player games and really enjoyed them, and
we're gonna get to that in a second.
Oh, that's true. You're right. That's gaming. Okay, backing it up. But I also do personal journaling now, and I have revolutionized how I approach my day in terms of a to-do list, from a to-do list perspective, in that every morning I get up and I have a ton of fun doing my page layout spread for the day, which is just a really engaging way to get my to-do list down on paper and prioritized, right? In a way that I review it as I'm doing it and have everything set up, because I have my week, is laid out, but sometimes I'm not always good at looking at my week. And so making a page spread for a to-do list forces me to look at it daily and actually remember and know. It's great. And it engages all of my, creative stuff in terms of putting things together on paper, and has fed a new reasonably priced buy myself treats hobby, which is ooh, I bought more sticky notes. Ooh, I bought more stickers. Ooh, whatever. And it's okay because these things range from $2.50 to $10, and I'm getting one at a time. So there's no major investments. I can run to Michael's and get a thing, or I can be on Amazon getting something else and be and a little treat for me, and it's not a big deal. And then I get something special, and it lifts my spirits. So yeah. So journaling has been a thing, and I think I'm going to stick with it. I literally just polished off over the course of March 19th to May 17th. I polished off an entire journal for the first time ever, the entire thing cover to cover.
It's awesome.
Every page. So that's awesome and cool. So this morning I started my new one, and I laid everything out, and I made my table of contents, and I numbered all the pages, and yep, it's good. It's exciting. It's good stuff. So anyway, why don't we then move right along to talking about things that we actually learned about gaming that we're going to keep bringing forward with us. What's one of the things that you picked up gaming-wise?
So, unlike you, when the pandemic struck, I did not do a lot of online gaming.
Yeah, hadn't before. Yeah.
No. I did once in a blue moon. I wasn't running a podcast that existed solely on virtual games tabletops
for 5 years. Yeah.
So I had to learn, Roll20 and how to set up games for Roll20, and how to use fog of war, and how to put maps down, and how to create assets, online assets and everything for games. So I now know how to do all that stuff, and I'm going to be keeping that going forward, because while I'm really looking forward to having face-to-face games, one of my big hurdles for getting to game with all my other friends who don't live in Buffalo, like you and Schmitty and a whole host of people, was that I was a little hung up on not being very comfortable running games online. But since I'm now over that, thanks to the pandemic, I plan
trial by fire is what we call that.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't pretty at first, and I learned gradually. Like I didn't, learn everything the first session. I kind of eased into it. But yeah, one of the things I'm going to do going forward is I'm going to keep a virtual game for my non-local peeps. Mm-hmm. That is definitely going to be a thing so that I can actually play games with you and other people, because I really enjoyed, because I had to play online. Suddenly I was like, oh, I could play with all sorts of people.
Yeah, you're not limited geographically by who you can play with. Yeah. Not that the people that you're playing with geographically close are like bad people to play with.
No, I love my local groups.
Yeah, like you got a good crew, but like it just means that you have more options for other things. Like I am excited to continue playing Once More Into the Void.
Yeah, right? I gotta get that scheduled up again.
Yes, please.
Hadn't gotten it scheduled up yet, but we'll get it back and up and running. But yeah, it's yeah, like that was definitely a thing that I learned during the pandemic that I will not unlearn. Is that I got comfortable. Not only did I understand like how Roll20 worked, but I also like got comfortable with running a game online and kind of just being able to check in on everybody and learning all the kinds of ins and outs. Like it takes more energy and all of those things.
Yeah.
So
how to run it, what kind of time frames work better, like all of that stuff. And we've talked about a bunch of it here too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So one of the things that I actually picked up was a variety of, and this is interesting, this blends into the journaling part, right? But so like a variety of asynchronous games, right? Which means things that I'm playing online with people that we are not necessarily present at the same time playing simultaneously. So a lot of letter writing games, a lot of play by post, a lot of like, let's write a story together. We go back and forth between the two characters. That kind of thing really got me through a lot of the pandemic, like a lot of the pandemic, so much of it. Because when you are in the middle of something intense like that, sometimes, your energy levels vary throughout the day and all of that kind of stuff. Having something that you can turn to when you have high energy levels and engage with, and then be able to like slow down on when you aren't engaging with it really strongly or whatever it is along those lines, I think it was a really powerful tool. And like, I don't think I'm going to stop doing that kind of thing. And part of that, which is even less synchronous because there's no one to synchronize with, is single player games, right? And I picked up a bunch of those, right? Like, so it started with Field Guide to Memory, and that was a really fantastic experience. And then I have taken that forward into several more. And I intend to continue to do that. I'm waiting with bated breath for both. The Last Will and Testament of Gideon Blythe, which starting to feel pretty close. And then also Amending, which is way early on the Kickstarter because we weren't expecting fulfillment till July. But they're already starting to fulfill stuff on that, which is incredible. So I'm very excited about that one. And then if you're into this kind of thing, then get on this quickly because I don't know how much longer the Kickstarter lasts for, but Gian Shim has another Kickstarter up right now. Oh, shoot. It's something about shadow, but you're like a magician's apprentice trying to figure out what's going on by looking at their calendar. And it looks so cool. So like, get in on that now before that ends because I am already like so excited about it. But so journaling games, and then I've been playing 1,000-Year-Old Vampire. I played Precious Little Animal. And I have some other ones lined up that I want to play, which that has just been really delightful because again, it's something you can engage with kind of at your own pace whenever you want to. And so like somehow with 1,000-Year-Old Vampire, like I started really strong and then I've been slowing way down, but I'm like still excited about it. But I'm slowing way down in terms of how much time I'm spending on it. But I do want to get to the point where my poor vampire gets croaked. Anyway, yeah. What else? What else are you going to take away?
Yeah. I mean, I'll just really quick say about your vampire thing is, right, like I found during the pandemic, right? A self-care thing works for a while, and then when it doesn't work, you just got to rotate out to the next self-care thing. So
you just do whatever the next thing is. And so if it's not working anymore, then that's fine. But I'm like still swinging around to it occasionally. But it used to be at like write 1 to 2 entries a day.
Oh, I remember.
And now I'm like maybe an entry a week, right?
Yeah.
Like it's fine. Like it's not a problem.
Absolutely.
Because no one's waiting on me because it's just me. I am only beholden to myself. Yeah.
So the other thing that I picked up during lockdown that I would like to see going forward is I like not being sick.
Yeah, not being sick is great.
So I mean, I'm not a person who's prone to getting sick in the first place, but because of the pandemic, lockdown, masks, and the like, I honestly can't remember the last time I was sick. And I mean, I'm talking like, I think maybe 2019, maybe 2018, right? Like, I honestly don't remember anymore. And I would like to see that trend continue. And the way I'd like to see that continue at the game table is that I would like the social contract of my gaming group to amend itself so that when we are feeling, one of us is feeling under the weather, when one of us has had a cold, has a cold, or recovering from a cold, that we either, that person either games with a mask on, or we switch temporarily to virtual.
Yeah.
Because we could just simply be like, oh, I'm coming back from this cold. I feel kind of junky. Can we just play online this week?
Yeah. And it's not a big deal to switch. And I could be like,
oh, we could do that. I mean, there's a little switch, right? Because either I have to start keeping a virtual tabletop for every one of my games ready, or I gotta, be able to play with some like, cobbled together bits to play online. So I'm not 100% sure how I want to deal with that part yet, but I really do like the idea that if somebody had a cold and was like, oh, I'm recovering from a cold, but I'm fine to come to the game tonight, that they just put a mask on and come to the game.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I'm also thinking about this in terms of conventions because we all know that con cred is a thing. And like, I've come down with things at conventions because I've caught it at the convention and then been like, I remember one year at Origins, I was quite sick for a day.
Oh, I remember.
I was not well. But like I was like on panels and stuff, so I didn't feel like I had a lot of options. But like going forward in that situation, I would just wear a mask. Like I would literally put on a mask. Like I'm not this con crud stops with me.
Yeah, I would really like to see the so it'll start at my game table with destigmatizing wearing masks when we're not feeling well. And then, I agree. Like, I think that my convention kit for the future.
Yeah.
When one day I feel like going back to conventions.
It's going to include a mask.
We'll include probably 2, right? Like, one in a backup so that I can wash one at the end of each day and, and have a fresh one to wear, to the next day at the con. But I agree with you, right? Like, I think that, and again, I can easily do this at my table and then I'll worry about the rest of the world later. But I really like the idea of just recognizing like, oh, I'm feeling a little under the weather. I'm going to throw a mask on. I'm going to come over tonight. You guys good with that? Yeah, I'm totally good with that. Thank you for doing that. Mm-hmm. And also that may preclude us from canceling games.
Right.
Right? Like if somebody was like, oh, I'm feeling fine, but like I just literally got over like this cold. Sometimes people be hesitant or like, oh, I'm starting to feel under the weather or whatever. Like, maybe we'll just pass or whatever. I really like the idea that like, oh, I'm just going to throw a mask on. And are you cool if I come over with a mask on? And I'll be like, yeah, I'm totally cool. Or if I'm not, like, you know what? Why don't we just kick this game into virtual?
Yeah.
If you're up for playing, but you don't want to spread anything, I totally respect that. And we'll just kick this game into virtual and we'll play this week virtual. And if everybody's feeling fine next week, we'll bring it back to table.
Yeah.
Like, I think that's a thing that, think that's a thing that needs to happen. In the past, I canceled games because, people didn't want to come out. And I am more than certain, more than once, somebody showed up to my home game, like having just gotten over a cold.
Yeah.
And again, I'm not a person who gets sick very often, but other people at my table do. And so that person, who was just recovering may have gotten somebody else, like Bob, sick at the table. Right? Like, and nobody wants that.
Nobody wants to share their germs, right?
Oh,
yeah. It is a different type of polite respect that I think we would learn a lot from. Because we're not very good at respecting, I don't know, public airspace.
I mean, here's the thing.
We don't have a culture of it here.
Right.
And
but I also think
to keep it.
Yeah. I mean, I also think that we were very blasé about casual colds. Like, like it's just a cold. I'm fine.
Like, whatever.
And then, we have this terrible American habit of like, well, it's fine. I can just go to work with this cold.
Right. Well, I don't think it's a terrible habit. I think this gets way down into politics, right? But yes. Many people don't have a choice.
No. And that's the problem, right? So the problem is that because we aren't going to take the time off when we're sick, we also often don't take the time off when we're in recreation.
Yep.
Because we just don't.
Like whatever. I'm still doing my whole day because I already went through work the whole day. Right.
It's been it's very, for very bad reasons, it has been ingrained in us Americans to, like, unless you have a fever,
like,
dying. Don't come to work. And I only say that because I have a job with sick days. If you had a job with no sick days, then like people show up with fevers and stuff.
Yes.
And like that happens because people have to like go to work and survive. So not to get overly political here, but there has been this like playthrough mentality at cons, at home games, like wherever, where it's like, well, I'm a little under the weather, but I'm good to rock and roll. And all I'm saying now is if you're still good to rock and roll, just slap a mask on.
Put a mask on. Yeah.
Like just slap the mask on it.
If
and
you
then
want to roll,
I
then you should have put a mask on it. If you want to, then you should have put a mask on it.
Right. And then I don't have to deal with it later.
Yes.
Right?
Which is just polite and respectful.
It is polite and respectful. And so good. I would like my game group, and that's like, I don't think it's going to be a hard subject for us to broach. We all have pretty much the same views during the pandemic, so I feel very confident that I can just bring this up to the group and they'll be like, nope, that makes sense. We should just do that.
Yeah.
So
cool.
That is a future discussion I will be having with my game group. Will be about how do we want to deal with illness, masks, face-to-face, and virtual playing.
Yeah. So the one other thing that I was just going to touch on briefly is an entire genre of games that I didn't know existed before the pandemic, which is virtual specific games, right? Games that are actually written to be played online and don't work in person. Like, that's really cool. And there's some great ones out there, and I'm not going to stop playing them just because I can play in person again now, right? Because they're great.
Yeah. No, and you did a lot with those, right? Like, I mean,
yeah, and there's literally an entire genre of LARPs and called LOAGs and all sorts of stuff that I discovered kind of falling into that research. Boy, I think I'm pulling a Chris and like all of my devices are going off here. So that's my bad. I'm sorry. But yeah. Virtual specific games is a thing.
No, it's definitely a thing. And I mean, it was definitely part of the way. I mean, I remember you having a whole there's Ghosts in the Discord phase. Like,
it's a really good game.
It was. I played it with you.
Good games, Dave.
Yeah. This good stuff. All right. So yeah, Mo, those are some of the things that we have learned during pandemic that we're going to take forward with us. And I'm sure some of you are all kind of starting to pick through what are your like pandemic lessons that you like, pandemic lessons and habits and stuff that you want to bring forward with you.
Yeah. Send us a tweet on the Twitter and tell us.
Yeah, let us know.
Tell us what you're doing.
All right. I'm going to take a few minutes.
Yes.
I'm going to tell you my ridiculous
the wild
thing
one.
here.
It's pretty ridiculous.
All right. Let me just preface this by saying that many times, nearly every time, that I run into a problem or somebody says to me, like, do you ever wonder how to like this, that, or whatever, that like within a Google search, a page or two of a Google search, I have like found that somebody's already solved that solution. Right. I know you've never read any of the Amber series, but for those people like the older folks, like Google is like Ghost Wheel, right? Like it just searches through shadow till it finds the correct solution for whatever problem I have. But I have found a problem that I have not found a web page for. And this upsets me greatly because I am not the only person who has ever had this problem.
Surely not.
This is a kitchen problem, and it is not a sophisticated kitchen problem, so PK Sullivan, don't get snarky. PK Sullivan's like, making cooking videos in his kitchen.
Maybe he can answer it for you, though, maybe he's done the math.
No, it's fine. I have much respect for this, but I'm talking about a little simpler thing here, and that is tonight, I was making my daughter and I tots and nugs, tater tots and chicken nuggets, right? Because it's a thing we were in a rush tonight. Nobody really felt like cooking. Tots and nugs. Plus my daughter likes tots and nugs, that kind of thing. Okay, but here's the thing. The tater tots cook at 450 degrees for like 20 minutes. 20, 25. Depends on which brand of tater tots you're getting with. Don't get all over my case about it. 450 though. Chicken nuggets cook at like 375 for like 12 to 16 minutes. I don't want to cook one and then the other because my daughter is not going to have anything to do with that, right? Like she has no patience. She is not going to like wait for me to make tater tots and then wait for me to make chicken nuggets. Nor do I want my tater tots cold. I like to eat my food hot out of the oven.
Together, yes.
So I want all my food to finish cooking at the same time.
Yes.
So I was like, so I do this all the time, right? So it's not the first time I've ever made tots and nugs. I'm a parent, right? Like I'm fully capable of doing this, but I always do this. Like I always wind up doing this algebra, like cooking algebra, where I'm like, fine, like I'm putting the tater tots in for the full time because one, I don't lower the temperature on tater tots because you want tater tots to be crispy. And if you fuck with the temperature on tater tots, you get mushy tater tots crispy. And they're not good.
Gross.
Right. So 450 is our temperature. We're ride and die on 450. And so the tater tots are going in for 20 minutes. How long do I put the chicken nuggets in so that I don't burn or desiccate them, but yet they're cooked, warm, and they come out at the same time as the tater tots? So what inevitably happens is I'm like, okay, tater tots going in for 20 minutes at 450. 12 minutes into their cooking, I'm going to throw the tray in with the chicken nuggets, close everything, and then pull them all out together, right? I do that. So I got to this thing where I was like, there's got to be a web page that does this math, right? Where I just am like, here's my two ingredients, right? 450 for 20 minutes, 375 for 15 minutes. Now, and keep the 450 constant, right? Like hit a checkbox. And have it do the math that at 450, you need like 2/3 the time of 375, whatever. There's no web page.
Well, I think part of the reason is like, I think it works for tots and nugs, right?
Yeah.
Because like they're both from Frozen and they are not dissimilar in terms of size and thickness. But like if you were messing with the temperature / time on like a frozen casserole versus like a chicken nugget, like I don't know that you could, right? Like you couldn't cut down the time. You would just burn the top and the outside and then the inside would still be cold if you turned the oven temperature up.
Well, so right. So that so on the web page, you got to be able to say look,
this, you must cook at this temperature or this food is not going to come out right. So we're going to adjust down for this other thing or whatever it is.
But also there might be, I'm no cook here, but there might be some calculus where we can be like, okay, look, we're going to cook these two things. And in this case, allow both temperatures to be adjusted. So they say, you know what? Here's what I want you to do. I want you to raise the pot pie by 25 degrees.
Yep, and lower.
And we're going to lower the temperature on the other thing. And you're going to cook the first one longer and the pot pie like a little bit longer because or a little bit less because we raised whatever. You see how I'm getting here? Mm-hmm. There needs to be some machine learning here.
Yes.
Right? There needs to be like, so I tagged Google and IBM like on this because like I don't know why fucking Watson can't do this shit, and honestly I don't know why Siri can't answer this thing. Oh, I said her name. Careful, I have like
there's
4
so many
devices
that are about to respond to you right now.
Right, there's like a phone, a watch, and an iPad all within earshot, and I just said her name. But like I want to
she who shall not be named during podcast.
I just like I want to just be like I can't say it right like.
Yeah.
And then like,
hey person,
right. Like figure this out and then just have it come back and be like, yep, here's what you're going to do. Here's your cook plan. But it doesn't exist. So I inevitably just play this game where I have to do like this, like my own personal cooking algebra and just hope to God that I didn't either dry out those chicken nuggets or burn those tater tots or whatever. By the way, tonight I nailed it perfectly. Those chicken nuggets came out perfect. So I was very pleased with that. But all the same.
I will tell you, based on a quick Google search, when I looked, it looks like the air fryer may solve this problem for you.
Yeah, and that would be fine, right? So if the air fryer, like a lot of people were like, air fryer, Phil, you got to get the air fryer.
Got to get the air fryer. Like I'm
getting the air fryer. I'm getting the air fryer. Like that's a thing. But here's the thing that bugs me, right? It's not really the math, right? Like I can do the stupid math. What bugs me is that for everything else I've ever run into, like stupid shit, like I don't know, how do you get like a wave and like how do you get like, a wave file into something else, right? Like then you find like somebody made a page that converts that, right?
Yes.
Like how do I get a MIDI into a wave, right? And like you find some page that totally does it. For every one of those things that I've gone out onto Google for, somebody has like been like, I got you, Phil. I can convert this thing for you. I have a calculator that'll figure this out. I know. Like there was one day where I had to like figure out, I was doing a conference call across like 6 time zones.
Oh yeah. There's some great time zone calculators.
Yeah. And there's like this, like you just put in the time zone and it's like, here's where they kind of line up. If you want to get people like not too late on like one side and not too early on the other, right?
Yeah. You know what I also use all the time? The Mood Fabric Circle Skirt calculator, which just does the calculations of like, okay, like here's your waist. So here's the radius for the waist. And then here's for the length of the skirt. So like, here's how you cut it.
The purpose of the internet is to have solved mankind's deepest problems, right?
Circle skirts and how long to cook tots and nugs in the same oven.
But nobody has tackled this calculator.
So the funny thing is, this is where we get into my personal bread recipe. Speaking of bread again, I have actually messed with the time, the cooking temperature and time slightly, because it used to be like a bull, like a big old bull, and it used to cook in a Dutch oven, but like that shape was so unwieldy and not necessarily useful for like sandwiches and yada yada yada, that instead I do it as 2 baguettes, and if I do it at the full temperature that the bull used to cook at, then it gets very darker than I like it. And so then I had to like mess with the temperature, but also like there's I also put water in the oven because it has to cook while it's moist. Like there's all sorts of like adjustments that I've made, and I'm also a high altitude chef. So like,
yeah, you have a whole other difficulty.
Yeah.
Like you have to, I'm cooking at sea level.
What's funny about this to me is like everything that I do in terms of this stuff is just sheer instinct at this point.
Yeah, and I mean,
and most of the time I get it right because I've been doing it a lot.
Right.
But that's just sheer luck.
And for this 16 plus years I've been making tots and nugs for my kids, I can do this math and land it almost every time. I am only annoyed at the fact that the calculator to solve the problem doesn't exist. I am annoyed that somehow I found a problem that no one else in the universe seems to want to solve by making a web page for. Yeah. And that kind of freaks me out.
Yep. I guess you should build a website.
No, I'm not. I'm not designing a web page. And I don't know enough cooking to know how to do the math properly. All right. All of that said, that's my little bit of ridiculousness on the back end of the show.
That was your soapbox.
A little ranty, but it's fine. But we got to get out of the show.
Yes, we do.
The way we get out of the show, because it is stupid late.
It's late.
Is that I need you to tell me about another show on the Misdirected Mark Network, and then we'll head right into the closing.
Yeah. Well, tonight I'm going to tell you about the Misdirected Mark podcast. I know that one's going to come as a surprise to you.
It's a good one.
On the Misdirected Mark podcast, Phil, Bob, and Jerry go live every Tuesday night at 8 p.m. Eastern to break down and get inside of games, game mastering, playing games, and game design in an effort to entertain and inform you. And if you are interested in this game that I just mentioned a bunch of times, Once More Into the Void, you should check out last Tuesday's episode. I think I'm calculating both in the future and the past now. Last Tuesday's episode of Misdirected Mark, in which they chatted with Jamie and Jason, who currently have the Kickstarter up for Once More Into the Void. Jamie is amazing, and their game is fantastic. So we're excited to see that in publication.
Good stuff.
Yes.
Good stuff indeed. Say, Cinda, where do people find us on the internet?
Well, you can find us on Twitter at Pandas Talk Games. You can find us in the Misdirected Mark forums, which is forums.misdirectedmark.com, where you can also, BT dubs, find the Star Trek Watch Clubs. I totally just shared them with my coworkers today because he was like, I want the cut down versions. I was like, cool, you can just go watch them. They're still there. Anyway, or you can drop us an email, panda@misdirectedmark.com. And Phil, once they find us in one of those places, what can they do with that information?
Yeah, by all means, send us your ideas, your thoughts, your questions, the topics in gaming that you would like to hear us talk about. I do this spiel every week, so I'll keep it short. We like to talk about things on the show that are going to be helpful to all of you. We want your games to be better. And so if you have questions or thoughts or things like that, if you share them with us, we'll share our ideas about them, and maybe that'll give you something to take with you to your next game and make your game just that much better. Because in the end, that is what all of this is about.
In the end, it doesn't even matter.
No, it does matter. It totally matters. In the end, here, it totally matters. That's a song and a little shtick from your group, but here...
but it matters. We care,
here it
and
matters.
It matters. Good.
Yes.
Carry on.
If you like what we do here elsewhere on the Misdirected Mark Network, please consider supporting our Patreon campaign. Go to patreon.com/MMP. Patrons get access to the Bamboo Lounge from this show, the after show from the Misdirected Mark, the Slack Room for Life, and occasionally other things in non-pandemic times that we put out for our patrons. Those things are going to come back as we start to come back from pandemic. Slack Room for Life is chef's kiss, c'est magnifique. Great group of people. We have Friday luncheons where if you're working from home or working virtually or don't mind, calling in from work. Or
you're like in the UK where you're already done.
Yeah, if you're done for the day because you're in the UK. You just join us on Fridays and hang out with us. We eat lunch. We talk about all sorts of nonsense. It's really just like it's been a nice way to stay connected to a whole bunch of people all through the pandemic. The rest of the Slack community is just equally wonderful as well. And I enjoy that community immensely. If you are already supporting the Patreon campaign, we are immensely grateful. It helps to keep the lights on and allow us to do the things that we do each week. If you're unable to support the Patreon campaign, we understand completely. We just need a little help making sure other people find out about the show. Of course, you can just tell people about us, and we love that.
That's actually great.
It's super helpful, right? Like if you just tell your friends or post it on Twitter or something, super helpful. we inevitably, every time somebody does that, we inevitably get a couple more listeners. Like,
yeah.
I don't know if you know, I don't know if you guys know that.
Makes me happy.
I don't know if you guys know that, but like when you throw one of those things out there, or like when someone's like, hey, what are your favorite podcasts? And like you put our names in there, like inevitably we get like more listeners, and we appreciate that greatly. There's like one more thing you can do that like kind of just helps us get like people that you don't know, that we don't know, that we should both know.
Right. Right. That's a good way to put it. Yeah.
Exactly.
So if you would be so kind as to leave us a rating or review on Apple Podcasts or the podcatcher of your choice. Every new review we get really does actually then encourage people to listen to the show, which is super duper exciting. And it leaves warm, fuzzy feelings inside of me. Just like when on Twitter, you're like, hey, this show is great. And I'm like, oh, I have warm, fuzzy feelings inside. This is the best. Yes. So do that. And we much appreciate it. We much appreciate all the reviews that we already have. You guys all make my day pretty consistently, so I appreciate it, and I know Phil does too, even though we don't explode his phone anymore because of that one time.
That one time we don't
we don't do it anymore.
We don't do that anymore. That's no good. Say, Senda, show me your journal with all of your like cool things that you've done in the past couple months.
I'm so excited to share it with you.
Show me what you got, hey, show me what you got. Show me what you got, hey, show me what you got. Show me what you got, hey, show me what you got. Show me what you got.
This show is a joint production of She's a Super Geek and Misdirected Mark Productions, the media arm of Encoded Designs.
Show me what you got, hey, show me what you got. Show me what you got, hey, show me what you got. Show me what you got, hey, show me what you got. Show me what you got.
Yeah.
Yes, I have the waveforms. I should listen to that again.
Did you know? Well, you moved away from Spotify as your primary music source, but they have all of the different Cowboy Bebop. You know how Hackers has like 3 soundtracks?
Sure.
Cowboy Bebop has like 8. There's so many. They have like the full compilation of all the Cowboy Bebop soundtracks now on Spotify, and sometimes I just put it on because it's just so fucking good.
Now I have to go see.
Mm-hmm. It's real.
I feel like I already
good.
put it in, but
we shouldn't be spending time on this right now.
I mean, it's your fault.
Sorry about that.
It's
so
definitely on
needy.
here. I'll have to do it later. Oh, see, there's Tank right there. I could just play right now. All right, no, okay.
No.
For another day.
No.
Another day, Highlander.
I know. I'm like, maybe someday they'll get the Macross Plus soundtrack on there, because that one is also freaking amazing, and she also did that one. Just saying.
Ah, there we go. Cool.
Have you seen Macross Plus?
No, I watched the original, but like I did not go.
Yeah,
like,
no, it's just a movie. It's a movie.
Yeah.
And the reason that I like it, of course, is because there's like giant robots involved, but mostly it's this mystery about an AI and also like this relationship thing.
Oh yeah, you know what? I mean, God, it's been forever.
Totally into it, and it has Yoko Kanno music like as the AI doing like concert performances. It's really quite fantastic.
Part of me wants to binge watch all of Robotech. Like I haven't watched it since I was a kid, and I really like. Part of me is like, is it really good? Like, it was. I don't know. It was teenage Phil good,
right? Like, who knows what that means?
All right.
Okay, we got to do this.
Yeah, let's fire it up.
Do this thing. Hang on. Okay, now go. Bloop. Cue music. I'm getting us out. Cue music.
Boom, boom. Ah, yes. Say, Senda. Do you? Oh no, I failed the whole thing.
Yeah, you have to say "show me" first.
Yeah.